on how to make stuff. In fact, Got Meade was probably one of the only resources out there with much of anything. And we started experimenting a lot. And when I say we, it was different friends over the years helping me out, sometimes in living rooms, and definitely later on in my kitchen, going through different yeast strains, trying different nutrient, feedings, all sorts of different variables, and testing those against the control, and just learning a whole lot about it. And the whole time I had a pretty strong feeling that we were on something marketable, and kind of kept it as a back burner project. But when I was looking with my now business partner, Andrew Geffken, at a couple different businesses within the alcohol industry and what, sort of possibilities might be out there, we decided to take a closer look at Meade. And, that was 3 years ago, and a lot of gray hairs ago. But it's been really fun, and it's been shocking to see how excited people really are with what we're doing.
Well, from what you were telling me, you guys are pretty much making mead as fast as you can, and it's flying out the door about as fast as you can put it in cans and bottles.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that it's taken us a little bit by surprise. It's I've built a lot of physical things before, but building a business with all the different dynamics is a whole new experience. It's just amazing watching the growth and dealing with that growth. So we're making mead in some pretty big batches these days.
What were some of the resources you used to learn how to get off the ground with the meadery? I mean, like, where'd you start? In case anybody out there.
Are we talking early resources like recipes, fermentation, that kind of stuff, or later on?
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that eventually. But I'm saying what I was getting at was the when you decided I'm going to go pro, where did you find information on the business part of it?
I would say, by and large, a lot of time spent Googling, looking at breweries, talking to people. I'm an engineer by trade, and I spend a lot of time. I've just spent time making things my whole life. So when it came to our first set of fermentation tanks, I looked at what might be, what other people had used, what might be out there, what our costs, might be to get a set of plastic tanks, whether that would work for us, whether we could ambient cool them, that kind of thing. I just poured myself into a lot of different things. I don't know if I'd be able to name one or two resources or anything that really stood out, because there was so many things that we were soaking in during that period where we decided to go pro, and there wasn't any one source.
Okay. That's good, I guess. So basically it's just it's a lot of research and hard work.
Yeah, I mean, that's small business or any kind of real serious project.
Right.
Even if you have resources available, like kind of a how-to book, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the best situation for you in any given circumstance, depending on who you are and what you want to make and all those things. I need to know the why and the how of how something's going to work before I do it.
Engineers.
And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yep. I'm married to one. It's that same kind of thing.
I'm one too.
yeah.
Wow, a lot of engineers in Meade.
There actually is a lot of engineers and scientists in Meade.
Yeah, it attracts a lot of sciencey types.
Yeah, it really does.
Doctors, especially. I like. There's a bunch of medical research people who are doing it.
Well, Tom Reppus, who's a 2-time Best in Show for Home at the Mazer Cup, is a physician.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Well,
And I can name-
own it. I mean, we're essentially a bunch of people who probably have a reasonably high level of education. Our mind is, working on a lot of other things, probably throughout the day, to keep entertained and trying different things out. We're, as a whole, mead makers probably, if you started this as a hobby or started it as something on the side that you got into, you probably had a little bit of extra disposable income to be buying the honey and doing the homebrew side of things. So, we're a bunch of nerds who probably got into this because we were thinking about all sorts of cool things, and this was just something that caught on and stuck up as being really, really interesting,
Mm-hmm.
Then,
So
I think it's a better mousetrap for a lot of us too. I mean, I know the reason I got into Meade was, wow, I had this stuff at a Renaissance Festival, which at the time that was the only place you could find mead, and I got some, and I was like, well, this is good, but at $4 for a tiny little sippy cup thing and all of that, I can make my own, and I'll bet I could do it better, So I set upon, kind of like you, James, I went out and researched, which there wasn't a lot out there, and that was, kind of how Meade got started, was research. But, yeah, I mean, I wanted to make it. I wanted to make it better than what I had.
Well, I think that's also something kind of interesting because it's both on a amateur and on a professional level. It's something that provides a little bit more of a challenge, maybe even than homebrewing, because or brewing, at least on the business side, because you've got this sort of unknown, something that, even 10 years ago, there were only a few people really doing it, whereas the craft brew industry is already, full of breweries everywhere. It's something that trying to figure out what it is, how to work with it, how to make something really awesome. It's a little bit more unique, and it's a little bit more of a challenge, I think, to really get creative with it. So that's probably something that's pretty attractive too to people that are as nerdy as I probably am.
I saw that you started making mead in college, as you said earlier, but it seems like you never really stopped. You kept going as a hobby until 2013?
Yeah, I thought this was something that had a lot of potential even then. So through the first few different jobs out of college, and as I was going along, it was just something where when I had the opportunity and some willing friends, we got together and worked on some research batches where I'd, brew my maximum homebrew limit for the year in parallel with a few controls and a few different variables and work through that. And as you mentioned in the sort of blurb introduce me for this. You know, we would have these big annual parties to essentially get rid of all the extra mead. And,
darn.
Well,
I'll bet your friends hated you.
Branding isn't really something that I wanted to associate with historical things, because we want to, at least for Charm City, we want to present it as a little bit more modern thing to help you know, bring a wider audience into appreciating it. You know, these Viking parties were, and still are, pretty fun. So it kind of went hand in hand with that in some ways.
Was there any particular style that you were working on at the time, like trying to perfect?
Well, the first thing was really trying to get a really clean ferment on a, you know, a dried traditional mead. And as you guys know, and probably most people listening to this program know, that's not an easy thing to do in and of itself, because of the nutrient additions you need to make, the temperature, the you know, the acidity, you really, and most importantly, I think probably the yeast strain. Honey choice can be a big thing, but we wanted to get the basics right. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out sort of what sweetness I really felt comfortable with, what other people in at least my social network really wanted to, you know, enjoy. So started out working with just, you know, really basic stuff, dry, semi-sweet, you know, traditional meads.
Right.
And then going to work with some different flavor components sort of as time went on.
Yeah, traditional is always, in my opinion, the hardest, because there's no fruit or anything or spice to hide behind. You know?
Yeah, and you don't really want to complicate the matter either. So if you have a problem with your, you know, with your base product or your base method,
right,
you know, throwing fruit in there in the beginning, or you know, all kinds of different spices, it's hard to separate those different components out and work with them. If you're just throwing a bunch of stuff in a carboy and it doesn't come out very well, like, how do you break that down and figure out how it, you know, where you went wrong or where you went right? You know, it's
yeah.
That's why I spent a lot of time just working with the base product for a long time.
Cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. What I love to see is like some of the flavors people come up with and how they get there to them too. You know, on top of the basic traditional stuff. Yeah, like for instance, okay, this Retire by the Fire. So I taste the cocoa, vanilla, and the clove is really, really subtle in this. But we were talking before we went live. We were talking about what kind of cocoa do people use, and how do you make that work?
So it's kind of an interesting thing in that, because of shelf stability and people treat mead pretty poorly because they don't know what it is a lot of the time. So I have people who will leave, you know, our stuff in a hot car, a black car, all day in the middle of summer, where they would never do that with beer or wine. And then they write us a complaint about why it tastes a little off or doesn't taste like the last one they had.
Yeah.
Or you have, you know, retailers who will refrigerate every single beer that they carry, and then, you know, they leave our stuff on a shelf or, you know, sitting in a hot warehouse. You just don't really know. So it needs to be a really stable product, and we've taken the filtering quite a bit more as time has gone on. And